Jamie's Yellowstone final fate is so bad, it's insulting to Wes Bentley. Yellowstone wraps with a clear ending for Jamie, but it's so bad that it's insulting to Wes Bentley and the work he has put on the role for 5 seasons. Following a roller coaster last few episodes, starting off with the death of John Dutton IE, Taylor Sheridan delivers a supersized send-off to the Duttons of Montana as they deal with the financial problem at the ranch, while also deciding what's next after losing their patriarch. Case finally gets the freedom that he has long wanted with Monica and Tate, while Beth and Rip start over with Carter. While John's biological kids get their respective happily ever after, Yellowstone has a bigger challenge when wrapping up Jamie's story. The adopted Dutton brother has become an increasingly divisive character over the years, especially as the show pits him against the fan favorite Beth. It's no secret that Yellowstone had to make some changes in terms of where its final stretch would go, considering Kevin Costner's exit. That said, even before the actor's decision to not return for the final episodes of the neo-Western hit, the showdown between the siblings was already set up, which ended with Jamie's death. Sheridan was building the tension between Beth and Jamie for years. Yellowstone Season 1 didn't show just how much animosity the pair had against each other, but due to the subsequent events of the series, their respective grudges bubbled, setting up an all-out war on the heels of their father's death. Getting rid of John paved the way for the siblings to keep their threats. However, instead of staging multiple encounters, Beth and Jamie only have 2 proper scenes in Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2. That may be understandable, considering the circumstances, but it's still problematic for Bentley's character. While the last few episodes of Yellowstone feature Beth heavily, as she deals with the problems at the ranch and the death of her dad, the show barely follows Jamie. There are some episodes where his story is at the forefront of the storytelling, particularly in 353, which ended with the assassination of Sarah. Beyond that, however, Jamie only appears in a handful of scenes in Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2. Admittedly, he is generally cast as the spineless villain. Still, he's an interesting and complex character that should have had more focus. At the very least, Sheridan should have at least given him his due by awarding him better and longer scenes that would highlight Jamie's complexities and inner struggles. Bentley has played the role brilliantly, hence why opinions about him, whether positive or negative, are usually very strong. If anything, Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2 would have benefited from showing him more, as he deals with the fallout from John's death, Sarah's murder, and the collapse of his political career. Instead, he is treated as merely a supporting character, when he's tied to almost all big stories in the show's wrap-up. While some specific details of how Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2 was going to progress changed after Costner's exit, one thing that was always expected was Jamie and Beth's feud finally boiling over. It was the one thing that the show couldn't end without wrapping up. Sheridan opted to save their confrontation at the very end of the finale, after John's small but emotional funeral. Somehow, it seemed like Beth waited for her dad to be buried before settling the score between her and Jamie. Unfortunately, because the fight, as intense as it is, takes place in the final moments of the series, it's quite brief for something that the show has been teasing the public about for years. Beth has some badass moments during the entangle, including beating her brother with a crowbar multiple times. Jamie is able to fight her off, but in the end, Rip comes in to help his wife properly kill her brother with a fatal stab to the chest. Admittedly, it's difficult to imagine Yellowstone ending with Jamie not dying. However, the way it plays out is so anticlimactic. While Yellowstone follows Beth from the funeral to her mad dash to change and execute her plan, Jamie is only seen on his way home, unaware of her sister waiting for him. Beth is always going to win the war against her brother, but Bentley is so underutilized in Yellowstone Season 5. Part 2 that it's almost insulting to the actor, who has openly talked about the difficulties of playing such a complicated role in the hit neo-Western. Even the way he is killed is boring, especially considering all the other ways that the show executed death in the past. Conversations about whether this is really the end of Yellowstone continue even after the final. The confusion is rooted in various reports about Sheridan's potential plans to continue the series beyond its current ending. For what it's worth, Rib and Beth are almost confirmed to star in their spin-off, which Life is a Promise effectively set up. However, while it felt like the future was open for more storytelling opportunities for both Beth and Case, Jamie's fate always seemed like it was going to end once Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2 wrapped up. Because of that, Sheridan should have gone all out in terms of Bentley's final outing as the character. A more interesting way to wrap up his story while also satisfyingly staging Beth's win is to see Jamie grovel back to the Duttons for help as his political career crashes. This would have highlighted just how spineless he really is. In any case, he really didn't have anything to do with the murder of John. If anything, Sarah may have just taken advantage of his weakness to get what she wanted. Going this route would have allowed Bentley to be more prominent in Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2 without taking much away from the already limited screen time for Beth and Case, considering that it would stage more interactions among the siblings. This also doesn't mean that Jamie would have survived the events of the show. Beth could have still come up with a plan to kill him, but in a more creative and gruesome way, rather than just a brawl in his home. Jamie Dutton's final fate in Yellowstone is not just disappointing, it's an outright insult to Wes Bentley's masterful performance. Over 5 seasons, Bentley poured his soul into portraying Jamie, the black sheep of the Dutton family, crafting a character that was tragic, complex, and deeply misunderstood. And yet, after years of meticulous character development, Jamie's ending feels less like a culmination of his arc and more like a narrative afterthought. It's a disservice to both the actor and the story, undermining the intricate layers Bentley helped build over the years. From the beginning, Jamie was set up as Yellowstone's most tormented character. Adopted by John Dutton and raised under the crushing weight of his father's expectations, Jamie spent much of his life striving for acceptance, only to be repeatedly shunned, manipulated, and discarded. His tragic backstory, his internal battle between duty and ambition, and his eventual descent into outright rebellion all made him one of the most compelling figures in the show. Unlike John's biological children, Jamie was always an outsider looking in, his loyalty questioned at every turn, his attempts to carve out an identity of his own constantly thwarted. Wes Bentley took this material and elevated it to something extraordinary. His portrayal of Jamie was nuanced, layered with self-loathing, desperation, and a flickering hope that he might one day earn his place at the table. Even in Jamie's darkest moments, Bentley never allowed him to become a one-dimensional villain. Instead, he infused the character with a heartbreaking vulnerability, making him someone the audience could sympathize with, even when he made terrible choices. His performance turns Jamie into one of the most compelling anti-heroes in Yellowstone's vast landscape of morally gray characters. So how does Yellowstone repay Bentley's dedication? By giving Jamie an ending that feels rushed, unearned, and deeply unsatisfying. After spending the entire series fighting for his survival, navigating impossible moral dilemmas, and trying and failing to escape his father's grasp, Jamie's fate ultimately lacks any real weight. Rather than giving him the reckoning he deserved, whether that meant redemption, true rebellion, or a downfall of Shakespearean proportions, the show instead opts for a resolution that barely acknowledges his significance. It's as if Jamie was never really meant to be a crucial part of the Dutton saga, despite the years spent proving otherwise. To fully grasp the injustice of Jamie's final fate, one only has to look at the build-up leading to it. Jamie was positioned as a major player in the power struggle over the Dutton Empire. He had the political savvy to rival his father, the knowledge to dismantle the ranch's foundation, and the motivation to do so after being cast aside repeatedly. There were so many potential outcomes that could have been both narratively satisfying and true to his character. He could have fully turned against John, leading to a final battle of wits and strategy between father and son. He could have found redemption through an act of self-sacrifice, proving that despite everything, he was still a Dutton at heart. He could have even gone full antagonist, embracing his inner darkness and becoming the show's ultimate villain.